Okay, we'll get it started before the end of the break. Everything should be up there. So it should be able to run the application. It's gonna start. Okay. For some reason, my computer is not working properly recently. I have to power it off all the time. Morning, Moline. How you doing? How are things? So today, that's Rory. We are going to tackle, if this ever starts up, we're going to tackle the requirements, editing and deleting topic. And tell me, I've got a bad feeling about this. Localhost 8500. It's there. Kafka's not up and running properly. So over here, Kafka broker has not started. Is my bet. Can restart that anyway. Let's shut that down. Stop that. Starting to realize that I need to update things to get them done. And that's probably not a good habit to get into. I should always assess whether I should update. Because if a patch releases and breaks something, then I'm going to have a bad day trying to get back to where I was. I shouldn't automatically just update something. My assumption was then that the key value store wasn't updated. So these weren't getting things, but then I realized it was actually a failure to connect to Kafka. So in this event, the application, for the most part, will start up. You can use it. You can enter data. You just would never see it again if you refreshed. But it would recover from that scenario. On Docker. Let's get moving. Try that again. Services up. That should fall away. Because not all these should remain running. Init Kafka, which creates the topics if they don't exist, really just runs temporarily. There you go. Okay, that's good. There are some configuration things with Kafka that you can do. I know that to make sure it's a more resilient startup. I got to learn how to do that if I don't use Confluent Cloud in the end. Nerdy Biker, good afternoon. How you doing? Welcome in. Okay, so let's start the application up. What am I up to? I am building an application for tracking for work project planning and work tracking. So think if you're aware of Jira and tools like that. So I'm building a distributed system. Lots of little moving parts right this second. And trying to put my own take on things that I have spent years working with and the things that I found I don't like, the things that I found I do like about working in software. So I've worked on this project for the past year. The intention is if it becomes a product, it becomes a product. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Is the experience that's the more important thing. Basically what this is doing right now, this is the planning component that I'm focused on. Not just working on, I'm focused on this piece because I think it is a piece that is missing from what we do. And the idea here is that product management and management in general can work together to kind of define requirements around what they expect based upon their understanding. They don't have to worry about the actual stories. So the idea is they lay out the requirements, and then from here, developers can work with them to determine, is this requirement one story? Is it 5 stories? Does it have different pieces? And then create the stories off of those items so that from a product management perspective, they can tie everything up to the way they see things and the way they think about things, but the developers can have the stories and the items in the way they want. So this is the piece I'm kind of focused on today. It kind of like a user story, but not worrying about. So oftentimes when we're building stories, we end up in this debate of, okay, well, we need it to have value. The story shouldn't be too technical in its description because it should be an actual user story. So this is more trying to really get them to tell the story accurately without worrying about how the system is affected by it, right? The requirements they lay down, here's what I expect to see. Here's, there will be the ability to add attachments to requirements as well, but right now you can add attachments or screenshots, etc. You can add comments, etc., and track changes of the things. So the idea here is that I want to give a tool for PMs to sit there and kind of define the requirements without worrying, oh, well, does that fit in one story? Is that a story? Is that they shouldn't have to worry about that. They should be able to lay out what they expect, and developers should be able to work with them. And if this one requirement yields 3 stories, that's okay. To try and get more accurate information out of them. When we try and stuff things in stories, or we try and get stories solving both the technical aspect, that what the developers need from a story and what the PMs need from a story are actually 2 different things. So this is kind of my effort to solve that problem. And the idea being that there's a review date attached to everything. So a review date must be, in this, it's kind of giving urgency to these items because they've passed their review date, and understanding, where are we with things, right? The review date is a required field, and it is the next time this is up. The ability to alert on things. So right now we have the ability to alert on changes to this thing. So if someone changes this thing, if I subscribe to it, let's see if this works right now. Yeah. So I subscribe to it. If it gets changed by somebody else, a notification will appear in here telling me that it was changed. Then I can go into that item can see it in more detail there. So yeah, that's what I'm doing. So today the ability to edit these and delete these is on deck. And then we get to talk about permissions. Right now, there's not an extensive permission system through the application, so basically anyone will be able to delete or edit, but it will be necessary to somehow figure that out in the future. But yeah. Yeah, this is definitely a problem that appears, communication differences between PMs and devs. Yeah, and from a PM's perspective, so the idea, so what the intention here is, if this yields 3 stories, the PMs don't need to go and track those 3 stories. This screen will allow them to see those 3 stories. Maybe it's a progress bar here, maybe it's a stories, and they can see the list of stories that were created off this thing. Yet to determine that, but then they can see where those are in the process. My long-term goal is for them to have the ability to see a board similar to the regular swim lane board, but with all their stories on it. So even if it crosses different teams or different projects, they can see at a glance where their stories currently lie. Yeah, mini epics. So initiatives, planning items roll up into initiatives. Initiatives are general wide things. Planning items could be an epic, it could be a single story, but the idea is that the PM doesn't need to care about whether it's going to be 1 or 5 stories. They just care about getting the requirements out. And that's what I'm trying to aid, is that just focus on giving us the information, getting the requirements down in the way that you want to see them, and we can refine them before they become actual stories. And so the idea would be that before, once they say it's ready for planning, they can sit down with the dev team or dev leads, whatever, and say, okay, do these requirements make sense? Let's create some stories. And my intention is to build kind of a wizard process. Is basically, okay, this requirement, here's what it is. Well, we need 3 stories. Here's the additional information we need added to story A. Here's the additional information we need to add to story B, and then build those stories out in that kind of a workflow process. That then this can track still, but don't need, the developers can worry about the stories and how it breaks down, and the PMs can worry about the planning and how it breaks down, and they all link together anyway. So it's just giving those 2 different perspectives of the same thing. So, and then from a reporting perspective, people will be able to subscribe to, well, I care if this review date passes, or I care about if this assigned user changes, or I care about a requirement being added to this thing, or I care about, new comments being attached. So the idea will be that from a visibility perspective, management will be able to say, okay, tell me about all planning items being added to this project, right? So if it's added to the notifications project, I want to know. So increasing that visibility and trying to remove the need for the developers to constantly be like, yeah, we're this piece, we're doing this piece, but no, that other team's got this piece, and the developers, sorry, the developers don't need to be concerned about those sorts of things. Yeah. So if I subscribe to this, would I get notified whenever a story branch from it gets updated? Possibly. That would be a long-term goal, right? So from a GitHub perspective, yeah, if something got changed, or it got pushed, yeah. Because the same with Jira, right? You go into Jira, if you label the branches correctly, they'll appear in your stories. So yeah, you would be able to be notified, oh, story, the code got updated, or if a PR was made. I'm pretty sure that's available in the GitHub API. So long-term goals, yeah, those sorts of things would be exactly what I'd be looking to do, to try and tell people where things are. Because again, developers don't always know, especially in an area where, oh, there's a DevOps requirement, there's this team has this requirement and this team has this requirement, right? They're all part of the same planning item. They all roll up into the same feature, but they're needed. So now the PM would be able to look at this piece and never go near the developers boards and say, well, actually story A hasn't been picked up yet, so we can't proceed. So just hold off. but they can make an informed decision based upon where things are. If story A gets picked up, they can say, okay, now we're good to proceed. Has story A been completed? Yes, it has. Okay, now we can get these other two. So the developers can not worry about this, and the PMs can see it. Is kind of goal. Xcoding. Hello, how you doing? Welcome in. So, I mean, when you say stories get created from these, if one of those sub stories gets updated, would that reflect back in here and trigger notifications, or would devs still have to come back to this panel and I comment here? It would get triggered. So the idea would be that the progress or changes to those stories could also be subscribed to. Yeah. I want to increase visibility and decrease the need for people to say to like, if you get pulled into a stand up, where are we with X? Where are we with Y? Those are the things I don't want to worry about from a stand-up perspective. Stand-up should be, hey, I'm working on this. I did this yesterday. I'm stuck on this. Can someone help? Okay, we're good. PMs in stand-ups often come with, well, where are we with this story? Where are we with this item? Oh, I need to know about this item. And they've got specific demands. My goal would be to kind of remove that need, and PMs would be able to look at this and see, oh, that story is completed. Okay. So again, working on that status and that visibility. Yeah. So stories. So the overall architecture, by the way, we are architecture. So the way this system works is the system's broken down into components. So it's kind of a modular monolith in the back end. These are all different APIs. They all have their own data stores. So the planning piece over here, stories is yet to be done. It will live over here as another part of the system. As things change, they publish integration events through Kafka. The view side of things picks them up and display and allows them to be displayed. Changes get calculated against things, notifications. Oh, am I subscribed to this item? Yes, I am. Okay, you need a notification. Push the notification, and things like that. So it's a very distributed system. But yeah, the idea will be that when stories get created, the wizard would generate stories, and link those two things together. So the planning item would be told, hey, you have these stories, by the way. And then, yeah. Hey, Mojo, how's it going? Nice, like idea. Yes, as I said, this is a year of side project tinkering. We're getting there. It's starting to get to the point where I can visualize some of those things a little easier. It's going, hard time waking up, but I got to be in office today. Oof, fun. I have too many points, so I make glamorous entry and say hello to everyone. Hi, Kanye, how you doing? Good day, man. I don't know what it is, but my glasses seem to be getting dirtier. I seem to be fighting a losing battle. Um, what else? Yeah, I mean, if you have any questions, thoughts, opinions on what I'm doing, you're more than welcome to join in. Um, the stream is a mixture of code and conversation. I have no issues with diverting and talking about things, and if there's interest in the diagrams, etc. This project is not open source. I do share components of it. There are some Kafka, the pieces I've developed for the Kafka components, things like that are open sourced, and I'm happy to dig into more detail and show off components. But yeah, so right now it is broken down. Yeah, some pieces that aren't actually working yet. But eventually the goal would be that the tickets, support ticketing would come through here. So tickets could be promoted to planning items, tickets could be promoted to stories, and everything tracks and notifies, etc. Not data flow. Yeah, system interactions. So from the client through the API gateways, lots of Kafka, some mass transit / service bus stuff, some notifications, the service bus notifications. When a user gets added, they get the communication system deals with the email, so that gets sent a command through mass transit. So lots of little pieces all over the place. So today we are going to focus on editing and deleting. We'll start with deleting. That's an easy one, right? In theory. So again, we're to the point where what might seem like a small change does have impact on the rest of the system, right? So when I delete a requirement, that should publish. Let's have a look. Let's do stories, not that one. Setting the status. So those are the stories for the status. They were all done. So we can remove that one. Do a new one. And this is updating requirements. Story number 1. Deleting the requirement. So we need an endpoint for delete. We need to obviously we need a handler for the delete. We need to publish an event, an integration event for planning item, so that the rest of the system knows that, because the planning item has the list of requirements attached to it. This is going to be our first delete in the system. So that's going to be its own challenge. Requirements get published. Obviously, we don't want that requirement left behind. Otherwise, just making a mess. We need the system to tell other pieces, hey, by the way, you cleaned up. The way that Kafka normally handles that, or Confluent's guidance on that, is to send an empty message with the key. And if you get an empty message, you will it's essentially delete, right? So it's just a key with a null value. I am not sure yet whether my framework for Kafka will support that properly. Hey, Expanded. How you doing? So this is going to be a challenge. Up early today. So publish delete for 6:30 and I haven't slept. Oh, so not even up early. I'm doing fantastic. It's off to a decent start so far. I have coffee. I've eaten breakfast. I had coconut pancakes for breakfast. I'm on a high protein, low carb requirement, and or higher protein, low carb, and yeah, coconut pancakes are interesting. It's like eating cookie dough for breakfast. Kind of stodgy. Hi Sally, by the way. What software do you use to manage the creationist project management software? Just Obsidian, or do you have something like Trello too? So right now I'm using Obsidian. I have been using so I have a bit of an urgency here, because I have been using JetBrains Space, right? However, they are deprecating this very soon for free use. It's going to continue on for for paid usage, but I'm on the free, and I think in November they shut this down. So I have been using Space to do the tracking of the actual work so far, but yeah, the goal is to get this to the point where this can actually be dog fooded enough, and that's why I'm writing these out as is, because it does give me the ability to test and verify what do I actually need, because I know these aren't stories, um, but they have to meet that need right now, which is a risk because I could introduce things that I need for stories into a feature that's not meant for stories, right? It's meant for the exploration of the data. So yeah. I love Obsidian, by the way, but fight back and forth as I struggle to find the extensions plugins to cover exactly what I need. Damn. Yeah. Uh, it was a nice idea. But yeah, Space just didn't take off in the way JetBrains thought, I would imagine. So they're focusing it more on its Git responsibilities. Um, yeah, with Obsidian, thanks to Mojo here, um, I've included Excalidraw, so I love having my little drawings in here. I've got the Git plugin, so this is actually all committed. So um, um, as we work on things, then I can at least save all that. I don't have enough time to work on plugins and stuff, right? That's the problem. When you start that path, you're like, oh, I need to do this. I'll build a plugin for it. You've now diverted and created project number, you know, 68,000 or whatever. So yeah, with the Git plugin, Excalidraw plugin, Obsidian is doing what I need here. So yeah. So that's why I'm doing it this way. I'm not going to keep using Space where I don't need to use Space. I'm going to try and get this workflow moving to identify, okay, what do I need to build? You start building the tools you need to create a project, and you're down the rabbit hole. Yeah, yeah. I've barely got enough time to do this, let alone to build anything else. So when we publish the delete, so that's the story one, and again, this is the planning project part. So in a real world, these are, as I've said before, these projects could actually be entirely different teams, right? Story number two, um, view integration. View should delete the requirement. Now I've got a suspicion that my code will fall in a big dark hole when I go and try and do a delete. I think there's a gap there in the behavior, so this will be a good test. View should delete the requirement told. Update the. So let's go check the code. So when we get a integration event for planning item, right? Update. So this is the planning item requirements, right? This is the actual requirements. So you can see we just add right now. So this clearly needs to change. And for the update, if it's changed, we don't test to see if requirements have changed. So we need to validate that part first. View should trigger change and requirements differing. Yes, I've got Rory on YouTube up playing Gran Turismo. I'm not actively watching it. I do have the stream up, but I do like to look. You happy now, dogs? You had run around time. They must have been playing hard because Taylor sat at my feet panting like an idiot. You okay, little one? You good girl. Um, so we know that the view should trigger a change. So again, here we say has changed, and then we call we update the thing. So we need to update requirements. Because right now all we do is check last updated. That's wrong. That's wrong. From a integration perspective, that's a bad choice, because what that says is, okay, if the last updated has changed, I'll take whatever value is in there. What I should do there is, if that last updated on the incoming command is newer than mine, then I take it. So if I was to replay messages or something, this could kind of keep updating the system in a wrong order, right? So I do want to address that. Whenever you're dealing with messaging like this, those sorts of things will trip you up. Because you've got to remember that messages can come out of sequence. Messages can come, you could replay messages. They could get delayed. So there's all manner of reasons why they don't get to you. So understanding those things and making sure you're writing the code. Like, I've clearly made a mistake there. I said, okay, if the last update is different, because what I could do here is just do that, right? And this is good enough, because if the last updated is different, then I'm good. What I really should do is say, okay, if the last updated is newer than the one I have, then yeah, we take this record. I don't actually need to check all these fields. That's actually wasteful. So I could probably remove this and just check to see if the last updated is newer than the one I have, and then say, yep, we're good. So from the view integration perspective, we've got to delete the requirement when we're told, and then we should trigger the change on the requirements differing. Let's just say update requirements on planning item. So that would deal with the requirements getting there, would deal with the planning item no longer having the requirement attached. What else would we need? I think that's it from that perspective right now. From the UI perspective, so you see, what I'm trying to demonstrate here is the fact that realistically these can actually be independent stories that are worked upon. And if we look at the actual requirement, from the requirements perspective, from the planning perspective, I just need to be able to delete a requirement. Right? I should be able to click a box, be prompted, and then when I say yes, it should be removed. Right? But this actually does yield different stories, because if we can work on as a solo dev, they're all one story, right? Even if I break them up into multiple stories, I'm just making life harder on myself, because I'm creating branches and merging more often. But if we were working in different teams, then the team working on the view side of things could actually integrate this. And the beauty and the curse of distributed systems is, for every action I take here that has an integration event requirement, right? Any system consuming it also has a reason for change. And that's kind of why I'm going into this now. Will changes deal with this properly? Do I need to care about changes right now? I think it's worthwhile understanding how changes will break, rather than digging down and thinking, oh, well, maybe it'll work and maybe it won't work, and how's it going to deal with this? Let's just leave it for right a second. Let's wait to see what happens and how it reports it. And if it manages, it could crash, right? But I'm willing to find that out now rather than later. But if I was to do a reporting database, that now has a requirement. So the number of stories that you create is going to grow as your system grows, based upon an integration change. So it is, again, the PM, this feels like a really easy requirement. I just want to delete. I just want a little bin here. I click it. It prompts me. I say yes. Done. But there's a knock-on impact. So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. Story 3. Update the visuals. We need to add icon on requirement panel for delete. Provide confirm dialog. Modal. No, just yes, no. Update service, update signal store. So when I delete the requirement, I want to update the planning item in the signal store and remove it from there after I've confirmed that I've deleted the actual thing. So once I get confirmation back from the server, we're good, that I deleted it, then yeah, we remove it from the client. It won't be removed until the view gets it. So you could potentially, and this is another thing we're going to have to look at later on in terms of data consistency, in terms of resilience. If I click the little bin on the requirement, I hit yes, it removes it from here. Great, the store's updated. I navigate away, I come back, it's still gone because my store has it removed. I hit this icon right here, this little refresh icon. That re-shows because that part of the system hasn't updated yet. What should I do? If I hit delete now, it's going to crash. It's got it. It does work, but now the user thinks the system's broken. So I'm going to have to figure out that challenge later on. Like, and again, from the client side, it's just understanding and learning better data access patterns. Is it the flaw of the way I'm doing it? Try and figure those things out as I go. Some of this is stuff that I've not done in a long time. Some of this is stuff I've never done, right? So the store stuff I've never done. And I haven't worked on a public facing website, like a user website in a few years, directly. So my comfort zone is definitely back end code. So yeah, there's impacts, right? So we got to understand those things. Okay, so update the visuals. We're gonna wait that out, I think, actually. I need to get into a better habit of taking the breaks and taking a few minutes pause. So I click delete, the action happens, it invokes the server call, it updates the UI. Is there anything more to do? I still think changes is unknown. I'm not sure changes is going to, although right now we haven't even expanded to dealing with the changes to the point where we know the difference between requirements. It's just going to do this. It's going to show from, see here, from 1 to 2, from blank to 1. We're not processing this differently. We're not processing this the same way right now. So I think it'll just do something similar to this. It'll just go from 1 to, from 2 to 1. I think that'll deal okay with that one. So let's get that. Yeah, I do apologize for ads if you were stuck behind ads at all. If ever I'm talking and that happens and you actually are paying attention to what I'm actually talking about, just let me know. I will pause. I don't always realize until much later. But if I see it, I will try and take the break. Okay, so we have 3 stories. And again, I'm going to work on these as one, purely from the uh, purely from an efficiency standpoint. But ultimately, these could be 3 completely different stories worked on by 3 completely different teams, which is again why I feel that requirements are a thing. So let's get started. And again, if you feel that I'm going wrong, if you feel I'm not being detailed enough, if you have learnings you have about from going through this process yourself, I'd love to hear the stories, right? I'd love to hear why you don't like something, or do you think this is going to solve something? Do you think it's going to create more problems? Like, I'm interested in knowing those experiences and understanding people's different approaches, because my approach, my experience is very different than everybody else's. So, yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to do feature slash delete, remove requirement. I'm going to go to the I don't think any of the tools have a delete option. It just has the close with something like won't fix. It's funny you bring that up. I was just considering that exact same thing. Well, in a different perspective. I was thinking it from I'm going to go to I'm going to delete it. It might not be, because a lot of times people do worry about, oh, well, if you delete it, what if I need it back, right? Again, the idea of these requirements is that the PM can refine these things. They can clean these things up. And ultimately, permissions would say that only the person, maybe that we say that only the person who actually is assigned it and working on it can actually delete things. And from a tracking perspective, it would tell people it'd been removed. We could decide upon archiving. But we do get into that world of what if, and I'm scared if you remove that, then how do I know it happened? Or again, the idea of this is evolutionary, right? It's meant to be, you are trying to refine the information for the development team to go off and create stories from. Now, we could say for certain that once it goes to in progress, delete is not possible, right? There's the stories created, you can't delete requirements, right? We can put certain rules in there. You can't just delete a requirement if the story is attached to it, right? That's an impossibility. But right now we don't have that. So yeah, I appreciate that, Manoj. You are right. A lot of tools don't do it, but now stories, maybe those stories get, not worked on. But requirements, I'm going to go with the delete right this second. And as we get to the point, because what I want to do for those new to the stream, I want to get this to a point where I can open it up and have you be able to jump in and play with it if you'd like to, and see how it actually feels when you're actually using it. Create a tenant, sign up, go through the entire process, and have your own working space. So yeah. Yeah, I definitely hear the feedback there. Like, but again, I honestly believe in a let's not worry about mistakes. Let's try and make mistakes manageable. Maybe you have a reason to delete it, so it shouldn't. It never really should be deleted, but soft delete, I guess. Just my opinion. So I get the whole soft delete thing. I've worked in a lot of software with soft delete. Um, but the number of times I've seen someone say, "Well, what if I need that back?" I can count on one finger compared to the number of times they've never asked for that data again. And what you have is a load of data lying around in your system that no one ever uses, right? Um, I think protecting the delete is definitely a requirement. Um, Validating the delete is definitely a requirement. There will be an audit history. Um, but yeah, I'm just not certain that it isn't is I've never been convinced by soft delete. I think we need to make sure that the users who are using a system understand that is actually a final action, and you can't just hit a delete and now for the purpose of tracking, maybe they want an archive option, but right now I'm going to go with delete, and then we're going to see what feedback looks like. But I'm all for accountability in software. Yeah, I think that would actually let me make sure I capture that as a future feature. Requirements cannot be deleted once work has begun. Stories have been created based off. Yeah, I like delete removing the thing. It's also just less data to store, and you're not storing garbage until end of time. We've had users accidentally delete, but we've also had cases of other instructors deleting an assignment unbeknownst to the main professor. I totally get. I really appreciate the feedback, by the way. I totally get the need, like the fear of what if I delete this thing? Well, you had the permission to delete it. You acknowledged deleting it. You clearly meant to delete it. Like it's final. And again, the number of times I've actually been asked to restore stuff that has been deleted is very, very minimal compared to the times when that data's just sat there for years, right? So I think it's a training thing. I think it's a system. We can put protections in place. We can say we can actually provide the organization with the you're not able to delete requirements, right? Um, yeah, and in this case, this is meant to be an evolutionary tool, right? It's meant to be a there's no work right now. There's no work based off this. There's just the PM should be able to. Oh, I don't like that requirement. I'll delete that. I'll add this new one. I'll delete that. Maybe we do put it in changes. Maybe we track the change so that if they delete it, they can still get it back from its changes and just say, yeah, it was changed from this to nothing. Let's change it back, or let's recover it in some way. But I want to make it an action that has consequence, that has need. So um, if they deleted a story, that's a bigger problem, right? So I don't think stories would ever get deleted. Stories would just get marked as actually not required. To Biker's point, you're working with professionals. We deal with teens, and so we have to be very good at audit trail. We get about 3 requests a day to restore documents. True. So anyone can delete it, just the person who created it. So permissions are something that I haven't got in place yet. That is definitely something I would consider. I think the person who created it is the person who can delete it. I don't think anyone should be able to delete it, especially if they're the assigned user. I think, yeah. Is this officially delete and confirm or move to an archive area for 30 days and delete after 30 days? No, this is delete. And I'd be interested once we get this to a good point where I can open this up for everyone. If you actually can use it, if you can show it to people or use it yourself, and that sort of feedback is the sort of stuff that will start to shape the future, right? Or someone in a specific permission group, because if that user is away or unreachable. So I'll give you an example. Google. If an employee is no longer an employee and they have meetings configured on a calendar, tough. Everyone just unsubscribe from it because you can't change that meeting. You have to go through all sorts of hoops to get someone to actually make that meeting change. Yeah. So I think that's definitely a valid discussion. I think it's something that permissions at the application level, and it's why I'm not tackling it right now, because I don't know what I don't know. I don't know, again, right now I'm trying to evolve this to the point where it's a usable platform for me to actually build future stories off of, right? Yeah. Right now we're using Auth0. We do have some permissions in place. I've yet to figure out the whole permissions per tenant thing, because right now it's permission per user, which is not sufficient because you need tenant level permissions. So authorization and authentication may need to be split in some way, and I don't know how to do that right now. Wow. Nice. That's impressive. Um, yeah. So let's start working on this branch. So we'll start with the delete. So basically, in planning, because again, this is all the planning components, right? We're going to need not that one. We need a requirement. We have an add requirement. Requirements. Is deleted. Fact. Requirement is removed. Fact. Requirement deleted. Main event is queued. So this listens to requirement created. So we can do the same thing in reverse. Yeah, it's got the identifier. This one comes with a bit more of a challenge though. No, it doesn't. It's fine. It's actually a little easier. So the way that the system works is when a side effect happens, we create a domain event. It's actually in the model itself, so the domain events are in here. When I do delete in a second, It's interesting. Actually, this is from a design perspective, actually a little bit more interesting than I realized. Because there's nothing to do with the actual requirement itself. I'm just going to delete it. So how do I know it's deleted? I can't publish a domain event, but I need a domain event. So essentially, that's what I want to do. I want to validate, was it removed and did an event fire? I retrieve it if it fails, it's successful. Yeah. So I mean, essentially the code is get the, that gets the planning item. Why do I get the, oh, because I need the planning item ID. That's all I need the planning item for there. Awesome. I don't need the, so I need the requirement repository just to add. So I'm going to need just this, and then I'm going to call delete, but I don't have, there's no, this is where marking it as deleted would actually be cleaner, because I'd actually be able to say, yeah, by the way, it's deleted. Wow. Best viewers and followers. Deny. That's funny. Twitch was like, oh, by the way, do you want to allow or deny this message? Seribot had already banned the user it came from. So Seribot was like, no, get out. And Twitch is like, maybe this is legit. Let's start this out a little bit. Delete requirement. You think I'd be able to type that by now. Public record command GUID. Yeah, that's that, and that's that. So we need a iRepository of requirements. And then var repository dot first to default new entity by identifier spec requirement command dot. So that gets a requirement. I mean, it doesn't really matter if that's if it's not found. It's just like, okay. Because that's essentially the success. That's essentially the code to delete the requirement. The problem is there's no trigger there. So the way the system works is the entity, which is kind of this is the data model and kind of it's not, brain. I cannot think of the word right this second. Aggregate. There we go. It has some behavior to it, right? So it's not just a data model. Again, something I want to do. I do want to change somewhere. But the idea being that this adds a domain event that this happened when it commits to the database, and again, so that the system doesn't start producing events randomly, even if it fails. This would actually only happen once the database commit has happened. So it's been stored in the database. Yeah, we're good. We can publish this event. That event also gets sent to a data table rather than it gets sent to a table rather than the actual publishing, so that if that was to fail, it can be retried and the system, as best as possible, remains intact. But the issue is now I don't have, like, delete on here does not make sense. I mean, I suppose I'm gonna have to do it that way just to publish this event. But it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't change the data of the object in any way, shape, or form, because this item is going to get removed. So I guess public, not private, um, delete requirement dot handler subject. So we're checking to see repository dot received delete async arg dot is requirement r goes to r dot id equals requirement id. If you're new here, if you see me say ID versus identifier, I use ID for internal IDs, integer normally. An identifier is a GUID that is shared between the systems. So I differentiate that way. They're both IDs. Just one is public and one is private. So each component of the system will have its own primary key IDs, but they won't be shared to other parts of the system. The not that one, bad idea. The identifier is what's shared around the system. So ID versus identifier. So I want to validate that I deleted, and I also want to validate, and again, this is going to be this might not work the way and let's see. Let's see. I don't think this is going to work. I think I've got a bit more engineering here, and this is the challenge, right? When you do something, when you're planning and you're preparing, you talk about, oh yeah, we just need to do this, and then you get to the code and you realize, and let's say you've gone and pointed it, like okay, well, we're going to do this. It's pretty much a 3. That's a 2. Oh, we haven't got a dialogue. That's a 2, right? So we point the stories, and then we go in the code. Now you can't prep every single piece. You can't understand um, little nuances or little problems you're going to come up against all the time. That's why you point. You don't give an actual time estimate, because every time you give a time estimate, people expect it's just, yeah. So this is one of those areas where Yep. It's more frustrating when a PM says, well, it's just this, right? Again, well, it's just delete. Well, delete just opened up a can of worms, because what I didn't think about is the fact that I haven't actually done delete yet. Therefore, that might be more complicated than I expected it to be. And it is. So requirement dot domain events dot of type requirement deleted dot count. C goes to C dot requirement identifier equals private period. And again, if you have thoughts or opinions on what I'm doing, I'm more than happy to listen. I really do appreciate the conversation and the feedback, because I'm trying to build this. I might be not solving a problem. I might be making more problems. But if I can potentially help developers do something, or actually not even developers, PMs do something that means that developers' lives are easier, that's what I'm trying to do. So if you have opinions, please share. Just have to wire it into this function in our current code. Something I said before, realizing the function wasn't following SRP. Or any sense. I didn't identify it, the main event. So requirement deleted, identifier. Is that enough? No, we need planning item identifier. We need to know which planning item that's come from. Let's switch them around. It's not enough to know just the identifier, because we've deleted it. And by the time we get to any handlers, that actually won't be there anymore. So we can't go back and get the planning item that it was associated with. So we need to publish all the information necessary to pull this out again. So from our testing perspective, requirement deleted, identifier, and planning item identifier. Did I just mess that up? No. No. I didn't. Private period. Planning item identifier equals new grid. So let's do that. Let's do that. Why did you try and do the act in the arrange? Come on, sort it out. One thing that concerns me with books about legacy code is they assume the legacy code was written reasonably. Yeah, I was right. I don't know. Okay, so in this instance, requirement itself has no public constructor. The reason being that you need to manage, you want to make sure that if someone goes to write new code against requirements, etc., let's say they have something that says, oh, well, when this happens, it should add a requirement automatically or whatever, right? You don't want them to have to. So if they don't use the create method, the domain event might not get added, and then things might not get told. So by doing this protection, I guarantee that if I'm touching this object for whatever reason, then there's a then the event will be published and the system will respond accordingly, because we know those pieces work. So it's more consistency there. But it does mean that I don't have the ability to just create a new requirement to test. So we have an object builder dot build entity requirement, and what this does is takes a a new object, and we can say ID equals requirement ID, identifier equals requirement identifier, planning item identifier equals planning item identifier, and that will set those things. We can say title equals does not well title and intended outcome equals the intended outcome. So we can set the object up. So when we run this now, parameter count mismatch. My bet is requirement has 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, created by user identifier ID. The problem is you have to know the object. I'm not testing this right this second. I'll need to do. Let's run that again. Let's see. No. Parameter count mismatch, build entity, object builder line 32. Constructor invoke. Ah, I've got a naming conflict somewhere. So planning item ID, title, intended outcome, created by user identifier. That's why. Planning item ID. Private int, planning item ID equals. Again, numbers just so that if I see them, I know what they are, but they're not in the same range or class. Object reference, planning item, requirement is deleted. Tests. Did I not? That returns that. That can't possibly be met because I don't return the planning item identifier, do I? Well, I don't publish the event, but I should still delete the requirement. I'm expecting test 1 to pass and test 2 to fail outright. So that's what I'm focused on right this second. I know that 1's going to fail, and that's okay. This one, though, I expected to receive a call matching. Delete. Actually received 1 non-matching call. So it didn't match the requirement. ID equals requirement ID. Oh. Well, that'd be why. Because it was null. There we go. So we actually do delete the requirement. The problem with setting objects, it's going to be wrong. So now, how did that fail? When requirement is deleted, object reference not set to an instance of an object. Oh. Will that work? I feel like that's wrong. How can that possibly? Oh, I know why. I know why. So with the other requirement, there's no domain events, right? I put no assertion in here, right? Now it'll fail. I made no assertion. So it's making sure you're writing unit tests and not just putting code in place is probably a good idea. This one should pass. Yeah. Run them again. There you go. Values differ. I expected 1, got 0. Okay, so I don't want to write this code because it just doesn't feel right. Because essentially what I'm going to say is that, which makes no sense whatsoever. I would be much happier if I could respond to this happening. Like, I think the components have been moved out of here. I think they're in foundation. Open foundation, new window. This might be a bit of a faff. Not too bad. No, I have foundation here. What am I talking about? You dipstick. We deliberately did this. We deliberately set this up so we could do this. This exact problem. Is it in here that I'm thinking about? Interceptors. So we have the domain event publishing, right? And this happens once the changes have saved to the database. My concern is that a deleted entity in here might not have events. But if I could, this is something I want to do. I'm weighing up my options here. I'd have to specify the properties, and I can't capture those properties now. That's the problem. So to get requirement deleted, the cleanest way right this second of doing that is to go into requirement here, add a delete method, public void, yeah, which adds a domain event. Let's not call that. A domain event is a side effect. It's not an actual thing. So this doesn't sit right. Because I'm not deleting it. So I'm telling a lie. I'm saying delete. Delete's not the right word. But again, notify deleted. Or notify of delete. Markers deleted. It will signal it. What I don't want to say is start exposing that behavior. into the actual. No, requirement. This feels wrong. Again, it's actually one where if I was archiving it, this would be much easier because I'd be able to say markers deleted and it would soft delete the actual flag, right? There would actually be a side effect. There would actually be a change to the object. But in this instance, I'm actually going to delete the physical record. So touching the physical record, touching the actual record to tell it, oh, by the way, tell everyone you deleted, doesn't seem right. It seems more like it should be, oh, well, it's a side effect of it actually being deleted. So I do have um, the last updated interceptor where this tracks anything that's modified and has and is of a type of identity. It will mark it as update. It will update the last updated. It will call that method on the identity, which will update its last updated record before it calls save. So this is on saving. So again, if I did a deleting interceptor, that would feel a little bit cleaner because then I wouldn't need that. I'd just be able to say, yeah, I'm deleting it, by the way. But then I would have to do something here in some way, shape, or form. Say, okay, by the way, when you're being deleted, here's what you trigger. Click override. Yes, saving changes. So how would you do it? Is this something you tackled? Is this something that you, well, firstly, is it, do we agree upon the problem? I suppose is the question. Now, from my perspective, I'm trying to make it so it's clean, but I don't just add fluff to the code, right? I don't mind if this doesn't have this event, right? If I can say, okay, well, it will publish the event, it just publishes as a side effect of the delete rather than actually explicitly because I did an action on the entity. It just doesn't feel right to say requirement dot markers deleted. Trigger this. Do I have enough information? Requirement. I'm not sure I have the planning. I might only have. It doesn't really hurt. So what I'm thinking is we have an on delete type of requirement deleted, and this would take planning item ID and then ID. Identifier actually. Something like that. And then have an extra interceptor that checks for deletes and validates does the entity itself have does that type of entity have an attribute for on delete that will trigger an event? Because basically it's the same as this, right? I inject the publisher. I just do all this. This is the same. I just build the domain event generically or dynamically, I suppose. I build the dynamic domain event and I publish the domain event the same way I do in the others. So I end up doing the same thing. But then anytime you mark something as deleted, all you have to do is add the attribute on it and it will publish that event. You don't have to deal with anything here. This code just stays nice and clean. The reason I'm sharing heading off a bit earlier, I found something called the Gilded Rose Carter, and it has a YouTube video that I'll put on my way to work. And I won't solve my problems, but I'm hoping it'll help some. Be interested to know how you apply that. But I'll check it out if you if you post it. Yeah. So again, part of my reason for streaming is to share this sort of stuff, right? Where I'm letting the internal debate out. I'm sharing my dilemmas here, why it's challenging. So to not have an explicit behavior. No. You're good. I look forward to seeing the Carter and stuff module. What are the actions that will be triggered by the delete event? So two integration events need to happen, right? First, we need to publish an integration event to say, oh, by the way, the planning item was updated. And the second event is the requirement was deleted, right? So we need to publish the fact that the requirement was deleted. So the idea being when we add a planning item or we add a requirement, you see how nothing actually triggers any notifications here. That's because it's done by me scheduling the domain events, and then when I go to save changes, those domain events get published and stored to SQL and then processed in the background. So they're out of sequence with this. The benefit of that is you don't need to deal with any of that stuff from here. If it falls over, it can be recovered. You can also have the audit history of it happening, etc. So I kind of like how it keeps this code relatively clean. Again, you don't have to do anything. And if you create something, if you create a requirement from a different handler, so I'll finish that thought. If you create a requirement from a different handle for whatever reason, you'll still get the domain event publishing because it's part of the actual object itself. So you publish two events: planning item updated and item deleted. No, I publish in this instance. I will publish one, which is requirement deleted, and that is subscribed to from. So here, when I add a requirement, right, I publish one domain event, requirement created. I have two subscribers to that event. One of them publishes the integration for the requirement because the requirements are necessary, and one updates the planning item and publishes the planning item. So they're distinct pieces of code that do their things. So I need the same thing for requirement deleted. I need a publish integration and a publish planning item integration from a requirement deleted. But if I go with the approach I'm going towards right this second, even if you delete the requirement from something else, that event still publishes, right? Because it doesn't matter where you delete it, it will publish the event because it's hooked into the entire domain, into the entire components. So something else could delete it, and I can guarantee that the event will get published and processed. Oh wow! I went and banned long live, and they actually followed. Oh. So what I'm debating here is the magic, I suppose. It's from a developer perspective. If you know the magic's in place in general, then you can trust in that, right? But does it aid in readability? So a newcomer to the code base has to understand there's certain things that happen as side effects to what you're doing. this code is not all that happens. So if I say, hey, go and look up when we add a requirement, what happens, they might not actually get to, oh, well, it publishes the main event, and that domain event gets, handled in two different ways and publishes two integration events, which then get triggered to Kafka. But it's an easy lesson to pick up on. And from a cleanliness perspective, I'd sooner see that, because at least it's obvious when you look at the object. Oh, on delete, we have a domain event. I wish it was generics. No, there's not generics, is there? No, you can't have generic attributes yet. Do you have generic attributes? You can have generic attributes. Ooh. So this would look like public class on delete attribute t event attribute, where t event is an iDomain event, and it would take ctor be an array of func t event object property selectors. And that would look like on delete requirement r goes to r dot, no, it's a parameter, right? R goes to r dot. Oh, what don't you like about that? Oh, requirement deleted. That works. So again, what I'm trying to do here, what I'm trying to think about is if I can do something similar to this, where I can use a change tracker, get the deleted, take the type of entity, pull the values off before I save it, and then publish the domain events that it requires, then that solves this problem as such. I can only choose fields that exist on the entity, but that's okay. Rams func t event convert into primary constructor, that's fine, but that doesn't really help my problem here. There's no, yeah, so